Let's talk about the dismissive avoidant and breadcrumbing and how it comes to be. So breadcrumbing is this concept that you're putting in the bare minimum into a relationship. Typically for the dismissive avoidant, that looks like someone who avoids conflict, brushes it under the rug, is unable to address concerns or feedback within the relationship. Those things never get addressed or handled. They just sort of turn their back to them, brush them under the rug, so the other person feels like nothing's being resolved and their needs are not getting met, their desires are not being heard, and their pain points are not being explored. It looks like someone who a lot of times shut down to physical touch. They're unable to be nurturing, attentive. There's no space for the emotions of the partner, whether they're sad or ashamed or afraid or angry or even happy. It's very difficult for them to show up in those things well for them. And it just looks like not being able to plan, not being able to chip in, not being able to really do anything to serve in the relationship. The DA tends to take more space, to be more alone, to sort of deprioritize their partner and prioritize themselves, their hobbies, their work, and other things. And so the partner feels very deprioritized and is really not getting the attention or any of their needs met. So how does this come to be? How does someone all of a sudden, you think about a DA and you think about someone being breadcrumbed and getting the bare minimum out of a relationship, yet you have these DAs that are in relationships, and they're married and they have children and families for many, many years. And your question might be, how in the world did you put up with this for so long? And by the time that a lot of times clients come to me, they've been in relationships for 15, 16, 20 plus years, and they're truly getting the bare minimum to the point where partners are having to beg them, like, can you just spend time like actually touching me physically, whether it's a hug or sitting next to me for a few minutes several times a week, or can you just send me a text because I'm getting ready to go in for my cancer treatment and I would like to hear from you. When I say they are getting the bare minimum, it's incredible how these people are sometimes even doubting themselves and their anxiousness about what they're asking for. And so being with a DA very much can create anxious attachment, and we'll talk about why that is. But for these people, have become so anxiously attached that when they're asking for things that are normal and healthy and they should be an expectation of any relationship, they feel like they are asking for too much and maybe they're being too much. And they're really asking for things that a secure partner would ask for. It's just they've been so conditioned to getting the bare minimum and being breadcrumbed, and so conditioned by intermittent reinforcement that they feel like asking for anything at all is not acceptable for them or is going to push their partner away. So let's talk about that intermittent reinforcement, because that is how that's how a DA will not purposely but subconsciously get their partner to become anxiously attached, to get them addicted to that relationship, and will get them to this place where they are able to breadcrumb and give them less and less over time. So B.F. Skinner, long time ago, did a study with rats called Rat City. So he took these rats, he gave them a lever in their cage, and they were normal, healthy rats. They did all the behaviors normal, healthy rats did. They ate, they played, they mated, all the good things. They would push the lever and they would get a pellet out every single time that they pushed the lever. And then he switched up the game on them, and they didn't get a pellet every time. So they would push it. It could be every 5 times, 10 times, 30 times. This created severe anxiety within the rats. So they stood in front of the lever and they just kept pushing it over and over and over again, looking to get that reward. And they eventually stopped doing all the things that rats did. They stopped eating, playing, mating, normal socialization behavior, all of that went away, and they became very, very addicted to that pellet. That is intermittent reinforcement. That is how we get any type of addiction. It creates addiction, and it does it in relationships too. So that's what happens with the dismissive avoidant. For someone who is with a dismissive avoidant, I guarantee you, if you go back and you look at their childhood, a lot of times they grew up in a childhood where there was intermittent reinforcement, so they already have a level of anxious attachment. And so what that looked like in their childhood was their parents did not consistently meet their needs. They showed up really well sometimes, and they really leaned into that nurturing, that affection. They sort of looked for that comfort and that feeling, right? That kind of became like a high to them. And whenever their parents would take that away or could not show up well, whether intentional or not intentional, they could have had a substance abuse issue. They could have been physically not present because of a job that took them away. There could have been a bunch of siblings, and so there wasn't a lot of time for one-on-one and focus on that child. But when that was withdrawn, they would get anxious and they would desire it back, and that creates addiction. That is intermittent reinforcement. So a lot of individuals that are with a DA have had that from their past. If they have not had that from their past, they will more than likely end up being anxiously attached if they stay with a DA for an extended period of time and get that constant intermittent reinforcement. So when the DA does not feel triggered and overwhelmed by the emotions, commitment, conflict, and closeness, all of the things a real relationship entails. When they don't feel overwhelmed by those things, then they lean in and then they're able to show up a lot better. Then they can show up well. They don't have to disassociate, withdraw, pull away, and shut down. So in those moments when they're leaning in, the anxiously attached person feels good. They feel like they're being more close and connected and intimate. They feel better. And then, of course, whenever there's closeness and intimacy or real problems come up, the DA then gets triggered and pulls away again. And then that person, it's withdrawn from the person who's anxiously attached. That creates intermittent reinforcement. So breadcrumbing does not happen all at one time, right? The DA shows up very well in the beginning. It's somewhere around the 4 to 8 mark, I would say, around 6 months, that they really, when a relationship really becomes solidified and it requires, like, where are we? What is the label we're going to have here? And the first conflicts come up and really dig in to get to know your partner deeper. That's when they start to pull away and slowly withdraw. So in the beginning, they show up very well. And so this breadcrumbing happens very slowly over time as they slowly pull away and put less and less and less into the relationship as they feel that they are losing their autonomy and their space and they do not want to be defined by a relationship. So being alone feels best for them. That feels safe whenever they have big emotions or they don't feel good about those. They want to suppress those. They've been taught to pull away and do that alone and to depend on themselves rather than rely on a partner. It doesn't feel safe for them to rely on a partner. So they're constantly pulling away, creating that intermittent reinforcement. And because the nature of intermittent reinforcement creates addiction, it's very dangerous in relationships. So by the time that I see a lot of these anxiously attached individuals, they are so used to getting the very, very bare minimum in relationships. I'm talking times when a partner can ask for a hug or ask for someone to just put their hand on their shoulder or their leg when they have gotten some just traumatizing news about their health or other things, and their partner is just unable to do it. They are literally getting the bare minimum. It's years of being completely alone in a relationship without a partner who is really showing up, investing, or putting effort into the relationship at all. And that happens gradually over time because of that intermittent reinforcement. They get to this place where they are just so anxiously attached and so addicted to waiting for their partner to lean in, to remembering the good times when they were pushing that lever and they were getting what they needed, that they just stay stuck like that rat in that moment of, if I just keep pushing the lever, if I just keep doing it, if I don't quit, eventually that partner is going to lean back in. Eventually I'm going to get that pellet and I'm going to feel good and everything's going to be okay. And they get stuck in that for years and years and years. So it's extremely dangerous. And that's why a lot of times that you look at these relationships from the outside and you say, how in the world could a person stay with a DA this long where they're not getting anything out of the relationship and they're just being deprioritized and devalued? This is why. It's because of the intermittent reinforcement and the very gradual progression of breadcrumbing, where they just sort of get paralyzed in this state of just wanting to reconnect and just wanting back what they once had when they were pushing that lever. So hopefully this help explains a little bit about why people stay with a DA for a long time. I do want to say that I work with a lot of DAs, and all of the DAs that come to me are typically ready to do their work. They're aware of what's going on. They can have awareness. Because they suppress emotions doesn't mean that they don't. Usually it takes something major, like something that smacks them in the face with self-reflection or the potential loss of a relationship. But I do work with a lot of DAs who are so willing to put in the work and are doing the work to change and make huge strides. Now, it's a very slow progression for them. They're slow processors. It takes time. You cannot just flood all your emotions and deal with everything at one time, especially if that's already overwhelming for someone. So it's a gradual process. But all of that to say that the DA does not do this intentionally. It is subconscious. It is because of their own fears, their own wounds, and their own desires to protect themselves and keep themselves safe. Most of them want to show up better. They just cannot make themselves do it. They sort of get stuck in this paralyzation of, I don't know what to do. I'm going to do it wrong. I don't know how to step out. But it is still very detrimental to a relationship and to a person. The behaviors that they do and the intermittent reinforcement and the breadcrumbing, it's still extremely damaging to a relationship and creates severe anxious attachment and a lot of issues for the other partner. So it definitely is something that the DA needs to work on. And if someone is anxiously attached, they definitely have to work towards secure attachment, and they have to look at what's going on in that relationship. A lot of people are kind of in this place of no contact with the DA, and that's kind of why, because the only way to really break that addiction and that intermittent reinforcement is no contact. If you have an addiction and you've got intermittent reinforcement and your brain is so stuck on that, you have to have a full break to be able to get out of that a lot of the time. So hopefully that shed some light on that particular topic.